Hey everybody, welcome to It's All on the Table. This lighting is really making me look a little old with all the washed out whatever in the red lip, but I'm wearing my 1989 shirt today, so had to do the Taylor red lip. Okay, so I'm gonna get my bearings. I haven't gotten to do a podcast in a couple weeks, and if you can't tell, I sound like I've been sick because I've been sick, and so has my whole family. We got that weird, maybe from China virus that's sinus infection-y, not fun. So that was my holiday break with the kids, 17 days of passing around the sickness. But I'm sure I'm not the only one. That being said, I have some really exciting stuff to talk about today. I'm excited about it. I'm really proud of it. So those that know me know that I've dealt with anxiety and depression for a long time. And I've had different ways over the years of coping with it, and different times of taking medication. And so starting in the end of 2020, I did get on medication again for anxiety and depression. I started taking Wellbutrin, and I have been on it for over 4 years, and I recently was able to stop it. So in this podcast, I wanted to talk about why I was on it, kind of a little bit of my journey in getting to be medicated, and then why I decided not to medicate, and how that experience has gone, and what I feel like I've been able to do to help myself get off of it. Okay, so I've dealt with anxiety since I was a child. Right around the time I was 6 years old, I started getting like the nervous stomach kind of situation, and I would lose sleep. I'd wake up really early in the morning with a nervous stomach. I would pace. I had like obsessive tendencies where I say obsessive, but like obsessive compulsive, where you're just like, I couldn't stop thinking about certain things, and I would overthink things, and I would have different little tics or habits to try and make myself feel more comfortable, and like routines before bed and whatever. A lot of it centered around things out of my routine. So like if we were gonna travel was a big one, or if holidays were coming, if something exciting was coming, whether I was excited or I was scared, it would pretty much always manifest in feeling nervous, maybe having an upset stomach. I made myself sick a lot, actually, from it. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was. And so that would go off and on throughout my childhood. I also understand now that a lot of it was correlated to whatever was going on in my life at the time that I didn't realize, or like whatever my family was dealing with. So there were different times where my parents may have had financial struggles or emotional relationships struggles. Their parents passed away, different things, and I was so close to my mom that I would absorb whatever she was feeling, and it would, manifest outwardly in me if mom was depressed or worried, and mom would like share everything. Like you knew she was, and you were scared because she seemed scared, and like that whole thing. And it's something I've tried really hard to not do with my kids. My mom didn't mean to, and we were her lifeline. She didn't have a ton of friends or family in the area, and so us kids were her companions. But I ended up carrying a lot of her emotional burden, and it became my own emotional burden, and I didn't realize it at the time. Little empath, Leo. So that's how that happened. And the best times I remember were when I was extremely physically active, whether I was doing sports, I was outside all the time, or if I was doing martial arts. So I did martial arts from 12 until 17 years old, and I was doing it like 5 to 6 days a week. So it was a very intense commitment for me, but I loved it, and it was really good for me, and I did much better at the time. And then I stopped martial arts when I started college, which I started at a community college when I was 17 in my senior year. And it was like an abrupt stop, and I had a boyfriend, and so school and boyfriend, I don't think I was eating that great, and I was not exercising anymore. And at the same time, my mom was in the throes of being really sick. When I was 19, she almost died. When I was 15, she almost died, or 15, 16. So like throughout those years, I would have like interruptions of something catastrophic happening and being worried, and so like you'd start to spiral, and then maybe things would get better and you'd start to kind of, so anyway, I dealt with a lot of ups and downs emotionally through those years. And then college, which was so many layers of anxiety and stress that I won't get into, but that was also hard for me. So I had really bad anxiety throughout college, to the point that like when I was 18, maybe even like 19, I think it was my second year, I was like anorexic. And I didn't mean to be, but I was so stressed out and I was so worried, and I felt sick all the time, and I was on the go so much because I was working at the same time I was going to college full time, and I was commuting to college, and then like whatever was going on with my mom and stuff, and so I just didn't eat. I was also a poor college student, and my parents weren't really supplementing my meals completely. Like I didn't have a meal plan, so I also didn't really have money for food a lot. But I'm 5'5", and I was 107 pounds, 109 pounds, which is bad for me. I was a 0. You could see my collarbones protruding. It was pretty bad. My weight was so low, I was having inner ear issues, and fainting. And, I didn't really understand at the time that it was all correlated and that I was kind of doing it to myself. But anyway, so, I went to the doctor. They're like, you need to eat more. Like, that would help you. And I was like, what? I don't have any food at the house, and I don't have any money for food. I remember going to my dad, and I was like, can we like just try to have more like bread in the house and maybe some deli meat or eggs, My parents were so distracted with everything they had going on, and, everything was kind of tumultuous. And, my money for the most part was going to like my car and my cell phone and stuff like that. So, I figured it out. I had lots of friends that fed me, friends' parents. They were all really nice. But that was, of course, when I felt like I was able to eat. So, there's that. And so, also lots of emotional ups and downs. And I think if you ask anybody who knew me in high school, in college, they would say that I was extremely emotional, overly emotional, probably considered manic or manic depressive. When things were good, they were really good. When they were bad, they were really bad. When something bad happened, it was like the end of the world. But I think I had learned to respond that way and think of things that way from my parents and from the things that we were going through with my mom. And so anything that was a setback felt like the end of the world. Like, oh, another problem. And I'm such a perfectionist, and I felt like I had so much pressure on me, whether that was self-inflicted or not, that, the idea of failing or not being capable was just debilitating. So I was on this hamster wheel of trying to be amazing or succeed and not, show everybody what a screw up I am. But then at the same time, like exhausting myself, stressing myself out, rushing through stuff. I definitely rushed through college. I don't think I got to stop and enjoy myself so much. Anyway, so then the beginning of my senior year of college, my mom passed away. And that was, that next year was the beginning of me having true panic attacks. Like I had some anxiety attacks in the past, which, is a little bit more of like an emotional meltdown, and the heart racing and all that. Like I was familiar with that feeling, but I started having panic attacks where like I felt like I was dying. Where I was having trouble breathing, or I was feeling faint or thought I would faint, where it felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest, and I was having invasive thoughts about like feeling so trapped that I needed to escape, to the point that like I was thinking about just jumping out of the car, like stuck in traffic on a bridge. I was like, I could just get out of the car and like jump off the bridge and drown. Yeah, sharing it all. And that was scary to have those thoughts, but I also didn't understand why I was having those thoughts, and it was a response to feeling trapped and powerless, which was a result of, when you lose somebody close to you, when you realize that death is so fragile, and it could happen at any moment. It's really earth-shattering, I think. And it kind of breaks the psychological bubble you might have of protection and it'll all work out and everything will be okay and nothing's that bad. And so, yeah, I didn't feel like that. I felt like everything was horrible and scary. Struggling with that really bad. And I had some amazing friends and my college boyfriend who really were there for me a lot, and they really tried. But they had no idea what was happening, like why I was behaving the way I was and responding, and they really didn't have the tools and knowledge to help me like maybe I needed. And ultimately, I had to just figure it out myself or fix it myself, which took a long time. And I feel like I ended up alienating a lot of friends and relationships, not just then, but honestly for a while because of it, because it's like you try to drop your burden on somebody else, or you're faking it to seem like you're okay, but you're really not, and it's manifesting in unhealthy like behavioral responses or emotional responses to things. And I also felt like they didn't understand me, like it was hard for me to feel so isolated in that people hadn't gone through what I had gone through, just with my mom, let alone anything else, or how I was feeling. And everyone's like, it's fine, it's no big deal, what are you stressed out about? I'm like, no, it's the end of the world. I just can't get on an airplane, or I can't, drive over a bridge or whatever. And I also like hit a lot of that. But anyway, so those people were really awesome, and I'm grateful that they were there for me. But I actually am not really friends with some of them now, and I think there was some damage done on my side towards them, that even if I'm not like that now, they still have an idea about me, and pain or resentment on how I may have handled things at the time. If any of you ever watch this, thanks for being there for me, because I felt like I was dying, and I felt like I could die at any moment, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I graduated college, and I got my first big girl job, and it's all I had ever wanted. All I ever wanted was to be on my own, have a job, and work, and be the career woman, independent woman. But it was terrifying, and I don't think I really knew what to do or what life looked like outside of college and my family. So that was a whole other layer. And around that time, I split with my college boyfriend, who I had been with for like 4 or 5 years, off and on. And I don't think we ever were meant to work out. I definitely think that was like a circumstantial situation. And I think I was a little bit codependent on him. He became a little bit of a crutch for my anxiety, whether he meant to or not, which was nice of him. But at the same time, I hit a point where I probably wasn't going to get better and grow if I did stay in that dynamic. And when you're young, you don't really know how to change that dynamic in the relationship. You just feel like you should leave or do something else. And, that's what I did. Ironically, I then, I started talking to Easton's dad, my oldest son's dad. And he was much older and just seemed like he was so calm and had stuff together, but was really aloof and unavailable. So I was still forced and able to create my own independent female streak and handle things on my own, but then was somewhat inspired by him seeming responsible and independent and grown, and so I wanted to like rise to the occasion of that. But the whole time, like, having horrendous anxiety that I was maybe trying to hide. And the way he interacted with me, and the unhealthy dynamic of non-commitment, and you never know when you're going to hear from him or see him, and all these different things, honestly made my anxiety way worse. And I didn't realize it at the time, but when you're chasing a narcissist, the psychological damage is there, whether you you don't usually know. And then even once you know, then you're in so deep or whatever. There's just a lot there. But also, in some ways, I felt like he was helping me, and maybe some ways he was. And in some ways, sort of tough love, which is kind of what I needed. But I don't know. It was a messy time. And so I was kind of confused and just trying to figure stuff out and really flying by the seat of my pants and barely functioning. I missed some work, like quite a bit of work, because I'd have like anxiety. And I worked 5 minutes from my house, and I wouldn't really do anything but get to work, get through the workday, and get home. And, you know, try and get myself ready to do it all over again. It was super overwhelming. And, you know, so when I would go off on like a rebellious streak to see him break my schedule or routine or whatever, kind of felt liberating. And I think it I don't know, in some ways it was a nice escape, I guess, too, from what I was feeling of like the overwhelming monotony. So then later on that year, so a couple months before I got pregnant, he was more aware of my anxiety, and I was suggested that I take medication. And he was a huge supporter of, you know, there are medications out there to help you. You don't have to struggle through it on your own. And I was like, I've always been kind of holistic, so I've really kind of been against medication for a long time. On the surface, I don't like the idea of it, and like not being self-reliant. And I also know that I'm chemically really sensitive to stuff, so it's a very delicate balance for me if you upset my body chemistry. And then also like I have like low, or like like a low tolerance for stuff, I guess. So side effects were rampant sometimes. And anyway, so I was like, I don't know about the medication, but I'll give it a try. And I remember the first week, it felt like it made my anxiety worse, and I was really stressed out. I think I was on Wellbutrin at the time. That's what they initially gave me to start. And he was like, just push through it. It's going to feel horrible, and then eventually it'll get better. And then like day 8 of me taking it, I actually started to feel better. And I thought maybe it was because of the medication. And so I continued to do that. And I can't tell you now if I really think that the medicine helped or not, or if it was psychosomatic. But anyway, so I took it for a couple months. Ended up getting pregnant, surprisingly. And then I knew I was going to keep my son, like pretty much immediately. I never really planned to not do that. And so almost immediately I stopped taking the medicine, cold turkey. And I didn't have any side effects that I was aware of, but I also was pregnant. So I was already just tired and feeling all the things. And so I don't really know how much of that was from pregnancy or not. And then the situation was so complicated and stressful and messy and upsetting that I don't know how much of those emotions were like possibly withdrawals, or if it was just circumstantial. So I can't really say, but I stopped taking it and I was good without it. And fast forward through pregnancy and my son being a few years old, and I got back on it again after his dad and I got back together. And I guess by the time Easton was 2, I was in a really bad place. It's probably one of the only times in my life where I wasn't suicidal, but was thinking a lot about not existing. And I just think I was just so overwhelmed and feeling so crippled. And I think I was in a situation that was not mentally healthy for me. And I do think he tried to help me in some ways, but I just think there was so much prior damage and my own personal trauma and damage that I hadn't dealt with. And the coping mechanisms in that relationship was that you didn't really talk about stuff in a way. Like you just stuffed it down, didn't feel it, didn't think it, and moved on. So what happened for me, it started manifesting in panic attacks, because that's literally why you have panic attacks, because you're suppressing feelings and emotions. And your subconscious and your body physically is like, I need to get this out. This doesn't feel right. I need to express this, I need to fix this. And so, whatever triggers it or however it manifests, it just does. And so that was real complicated. And I started taking more medication. So not only was I taking like Wellbutrin, I was taking Ativan. I was taking Ativan on a daily basis. Not heavy doses, but enough to make me feel like I could get going. Like I worked in a high-rise building downtown Norfolk, so it was a bit of a drive, and so I had anxiety about the driving and being on like the 24th floor of the building because I have a fear of heights, and I don't like feeling like stranded up high in the elevators and all the things. Like I could get sweaty palms talking about it. And so to do the big girl job in the big building, I would take Ativan every morning to make me believe that I wouldn't have a panic attack, right? And that I could just push through. And again, I don't know how much of it was the medicine or not. And then I remember taking it in the evenings at home with my son and his dad. And I got to the point where I was kind of functioning on it. And I also know that towards the end of that relationship, there was a certain point where I started detoxing the Ativan just because I wanted to and I knew I needed to. And it was horrible. Like I had horrible headaches and I felt really bad and it messed up my stomach and stuff. Like it was really complicated and I was like, this is not a long-term solution. So after that, I pretty much have only taken Ativan like if I was traveling, like going on airplane. You know, it makes the trip really interesting when you're sedated most of it. And then if you're also drinking, so then you're really tired and you don't really have any energy. And yeah, and I wouldn't recommend. So then that's a whole other experience that we can talk about. So anyway, after I left my son's dad, it felt like I physically had to. I felt like I was dying or already dead. I hated myself. I hated myself for being in that situation, being with somebody that I felt like was not, like, so not good for me. And that I let myself get to such a dark mental place about myself because I was trying so hard to have something or make something work. And I actually started therapy. I guess that's the other part of this I could talk about. I started therapy a little bit when my mom passed, and I did therapy off and on since I was 21. I did it a little bit after I had Easton, especially like when his dad and I got together. And throughout that relationship, and I actually stopped seeing one of the therapists because we basically diagnosed the situation as like narcissism, and I knew I wasn't going to leave yet. So I stopped seeing her because I just didn't want to lie about the fact that I wasn't going to make the decisions that I knew I needed to make for myself, and I couldn't just sit there and face it and acknowledge that. But then the sad thing is then I just didn't have anyone I was talking to, and I was keeping it all inside. I kept it all in from my family and my friends at a certain point. I also lost tons of family and friends being in that situation. And bottle. And I just started imploding. So after the end of all of that, I started therapy, and I was going twice a week for 6 months. Well, I guess maybe twice a week for a month, and then every week for the other 5 months. And she saved my life. She was amazing. I've recommended her to people still, and you know, I have quite a few different local resources for therapists for different things. I've tried lots of different stuff. So if anybody ever wanted any advice or, you know, had questions about what I did and where and who helped me and not, I'm happy to talk about it. So then this is going longer than I kind of thought it would too. It's a long story. So then I got better with the therapy, and I was on my own, and I started real estate, and I was like really in this great place for the most part, even though I was in limbo with court for like 4 years trying to fight for my son. And I was self-medicating a lot with wine, which is something I started when we split up because I had to go without my son half the time, and we were every other day. So the days I didn't have him, it was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I would get home from work and have dinner and have wine, and I would drink just enough wine quickly enough to make myself sleepy so that I could go to bed, so that I could get up and start the next day. And then that was the day I got my son, and then I was happy. And but then it honestly didn't stay that regimented, I would say. And I definitely, your tolerance picks up, and so you end up becoming a heavier drinker than maybe you realize, 1 or 2 glasses or more. And so that's something that I've processed through, and I've always been pretty good about not doing it when I have my son, or knowing like if I'm going to drive or we're going to be going places or out in events, like I'll rein it in. I'm actually more of like an at-home by myself drinker, which wasn't necessarily better. But so I had to kind of work through that. And then when I started real estate, it actually made it worse, because for the first time in my life, you had like free food and alcohol all the time. Everywhere you went, people were always taking you to lunch, in the office, events. It was so fun, and it was so nice, and you feel like you're rich, right? Because like I've always struggled, single mom life and whatever. But yeah, so it was really hard to turn down the food and the alcohol. And so not only did I gain weight, I started drinking more, and you drink during the day more. I'd never been a day drinker until real estate. And then depending on what company I was at or team, maybe they had different habits and patterns, and so I had to work through that. And so in the height of all of that, in 2019, wilding out, in a company team environment that was a lot of fun. We partied. And then I met my now husband, and we partied, and it was a good time. And then I'd have Easton half the time and be more buttoned up and mom, but like I was almost living like double lives with that. Anyway, like stuff kind of comes to a head, and I ended up starting a business with some friends, business partners, the beginning of 2020. And it was a really great decision, and it was really good for me, and it escalated me to a level I hadn't been at yet. And it was so empowering, and I'm so proud of myself for it. And I sold a lot of real estate, and I taught people, and I trained, and I recruited, and I did all the things whilst the world was coming to an end and we were in a pandemic. But regardless of how I feel about the pandemic at the time and now, it was terrifying. And there was a little bit of time where I really wondered if like the world was ending, and were we all going to get sick and die? And it was really scary, and it really triggered my past, and my mom, and like all of that stuff I'd already dealt with death and fear and sickness and stuff, and invasive thoughts and obsessing, and it was just so hard. And then I think I was self-medicating with alcohol still. There was just so much going on. And so finally, at the end of that year, Kevin and I were getting serious. I was separating from those business partners and starting my own company with a full team and agents under me. And it was so exciting, but so much responsibility, and, a little bit terrifying. I was really worried about being what I needed to be for everybody. And also financially, maintaining where I had been and or progressing, and it was just so much. And so basically the end of 2020, I was crumbling. I was breaking and crumbling. I was hardly able to eat. I couldn't eat unless I drank. So like, you barely eat all day, and maybe have caffeine, and then by the end of the afternoon, evening, I'd have a glass of wine, and then I'd be able to have dinner, and then I'd drink wine to go to sleep. But like my sleep was disrupted, and I was really stressed, and the panic attacks were getting worse, like driving and all of that. And I was crying a lot. Like I was crying like every day. And I think what was happening is the pandemic triggers were actually causing me that in my interpersonal relationship, because I hadn't really been in such a serious relationship where we were open and communicating. It was bringing to the surface a lot of past trauma that I hadn't ever really resolved or worked through. And so I was just feeling all the things, and that's not a bad thing, but it was uncomfortable. And because I'd been suppressing so much, it was just expelling in its own way. It was just so complicated and hard. And so I ended up getting on medication again. And I would say that it helped. But the honest truth in the last 4 years is that my anxiety never went away. And in some cases it was worse. Definitely. And my depression, which usually resulted from me feeling overwhelmed, and so it was hard to like get up and go, or you just didn't know where to begin, so you just didn't begin at all, or you just wanted to sleep to kind of feel like you were recharging or, you know, recovering from whatever you had experienced or dealt with. Like all of that stuff was still there, and yeah, I just can't say that the medicine made it better. And so the irony, I'm going to talk about the medication process and how they handled it and what they did for me, and it was just so complicated and messy. But long story short, I'm going to go into those details after I come to this point. I have been scaling back on my medication for the last year, and scaling back my drinking a lot. And then in the last couple months, I've become one of those people who, I've always kind of been against dyes, and like my parents talked about it a lot, but I'm going out of my way to make sure that we don't have anything with dye in it in our house if possible. And then seed oils and just products and ingredients that you can't name. You know, I'm trying to cut out all of that and like really actually go organic, which is really hard because it's really expensive, and you know, real estate money has been harder the last 2 years, and we have so many kids and everything. I've been trying to like cook from scratch. I'm very specific on if I drink alcohol, the kind that I drink, because I can tell when it has added preservatives and stuff. It makes me sick. So the irony is, in the last year, I've lost approximately 6 to 8 pounds. I've lost a lot of inflammation. Okay, so in the last year, I've lost about 6 to 8 pounds. I've lost a lot of inflammation. I had IBS for years, basically. Certainly the last 3 to 4 years, off and on. I don't really have that problem anymore. Aside from some hormonal influxes, or depending on, you know, if I binge eat or drink something in particular. But ultimately, like, I don't really deal with the IBS anymore, which is amazing. And that has been a huge factor in my anxiety and depression, so I'll touch back on that. And I was able to wean off of my medicine, so it's been, actually today's 4 weeks, I think. 4 weeks of no medication. I haven't taken Ativan, I haven't taken Wellbutrin, and I feel better. I feel better than I did when I was on the medication. And I didn't really have any withdrawals at all. And I think that that's because I think my diet and what I was taking in was actually a huge part of my anxiety and depression. It was inflaming all of these other things mentally and physically that I was dealing with, or had the possibility of dealing with. Like, it was making it so much worse. And so ironically, healing my body and my gut in turn helped heal my mind and my emotions so much. And I can tell now sometimes if you go out to eat and it's got the crap in it, like I can tell immediately, like my stomach will be upset that night, or like I'll feel like jittery and restless and like have trouble sleeping and all these different things. And it's just so crazy that like all along, like honestly, if our country was anything like Europe or some of the other foreign countries and banned so many of these ingredients and things in our food, many of us may not have the anxiety and depression that we do. And I just think it's really unfortunate that I know so many people dealing with anxiety and depression, and more people in the last few years than maybe I did growing up, or maybe people are more vocal about it. But isn't it really unfair that this food is being provided for us, supposedly for life sustaining, living, and they're not putting in it what they should to help us be healthy and live? And so then, okay, so stick with me on this. I do feel like our country has turned a blind eye to what they allow in our foods. And if you're not paying attention, you're ingesting poison and toxins. And then you're also overeating, because I will tell you, all of that stuff, it makes you crave it more, messes up your blood sugar, all those different things. So then you're overeating or over drinking or whatever. Like, I would drink till I felt like it settled my stomach so that I could eat, and then, so then, like, taking out all of that weird circular body response and blood sugar levels and things. Okay, so they're allowing these things in our food, and then we're having all of these physical and emotional responses, whether it be, diabetic, whether it be anxiety and depression, physical ailments. I have friends who, depending on what they eat, they have like arthritic flares and, autoimmune flares, all these different things. So then what? So then we go to the doctor and they tell us to get on medication. They don't ask us what we eat per se. They don't tell us don't eat this or that typically. They don't suggest a nutritionist. I've never had somebody suggest a nutritionist to me for my anxiety and depression. And they're very fast to give you medication. They typically don't let you leave the office without a prescription. And any of those prescriptions, especially when they first start giving you psychotic drugs, it's a 30-day revisit, because they have to see how you're doing. Sometimes it's 2 weeks and then 30 days and all of that. And so what you're doing is you're paying more and more for medical care inadvertently, whether you realize it or not, with these follow-up appointments. And then if you stay on anxiety, depression, all that medicine, you have to visit them whenever your prescription is up, you have to see them face to face before they can refill it. So whether you have a 30-day prescription or a 90-day prescription, you've got another appointment in the future. And something that I can go into later is I'm self-pay, okay? So this last year, finances was a huge part of me scaling back on my medication and my therapy and all of these different things, because every time I went, it was like $150 out of pocket. And my medication was anywhere from $40 to $80, depending on, the brand and like how many months dosage. So I was spending maybe $200 to $300 a month on anxiety and depression treatment. And I still had horrible anxiety and depression. It's so crazy. And so I just feel like Americans are just on this cycle, and they're really not getting the proper suggestions. And I don't think they're really getting care. They're getting, it's like they're getting infected, and then they're giving this thing that's supposed to help with the infection, but then it's giving this other byproduct, and then in the meantime, it's draining their finances, it's draining their energy. It's making it harder for them to be productive, to exercise, because my energy levels are so much better being off the medication. Not only do I sleep more deeply, I'm sleeping less long. Like, I don't need to sleep for 10 to 12 hours anymore. I can sleep for 6 to 8 and still have enough energy through the day to work. And I'm actually waking up with energy and wanting to like walk or run and stuff, because it was sedating me. It was suppressing me. And it's just so frustrating. So frustrating, because ultimately I feel like all I was trying to do was figure out how to be my best self for my family, to show up, to cope, to whatever, to live. And the suggestions I was getting were not productive ultimately for my long-term care. And so I saw something the other day, and I'm not a doctor, so don't, this might not be completely accurate, but I saw something that was talking about SSRIs. which are a type of anxiety depression medicine. And they said that it has to do with your serotonin. Serotonin is, like a happy hormone. And the medication doesn't help you produce more serotonin. The medication takes the serotonin you have and slows the release of it so that it's like a slow release over time instead of like fast release and then none. Which in some ways sounds helpful, but then you're like, okay, well, wait, if it doesn't help me increase my serotonin, and the lack of serotonin is why I'm feeling anxiety or depression, then how do I ever get off of this medication and have my own normal production of serotonin to live and be happy? Lifelong medication, hundreds of dollars a month, thousands of dollars over the years, and all it's doing is contributing to other ailments. Like, I hate to use the term big pharma, but I was like, what is this? I don't get it. So, all that's to say, I feel so much better now. So if anybody wants to talk about it, I'm happy to talk about it. And it's not all gone. I mean, like, I still have driving anxiety and stuff, but it's so much better. The fight, flight, or freeze, I was getting that flight and freeze feeling, and it would happen all the time in simple situations and simple intersections or whatever, and like those triggers are not as bad anymore. And it's not because I'm doing a lot more practices or psychological development against it. I really feel like my brain is more clear and relaxed, my body is clearer and more relaxed, and in turn it feels comfortable and safe. Okay, so like, let's talk about that. Like, is it because there's toxins in your body and your body knows that these are foreign toxins and they shouldn't be there, and that's why you feel restless and stressed out or sick all the time? Like your body's trying to tell you, hey, this does not feel good. And like, you might think it's your surroundings, but maybe that lack of safety feeling is actually like literally the cells in your body saying, help me, this is not normal, this is not good. So all that's to say, my husband and I have definitely become pseudo homesteaders this year, and I think we're continuing on that. So we've got our chickens, and he's an amazing gardener, so we've got our fruits and vegetables, and then this year I'm sure we'll expand on all of that. And I have my bread machine now, and I'm doing lots of stuff from scratch, and no processed cookies. I know he misses all the snacks, but I'm about to make my own goldfish. I'll let you know how that goes, and I have to say, our kids have been really awesome about it. They really have. They don't complain about it. They eat what we make. They like some of the stuff we do, so that's really cool. And I have really honest conversations about why we're making these changes, and that it's better for us. And like, I mean, it makes sense to them. The kids are like, yeah, that's logical. Let's do it, So my final thing I was going to talk about, because this is double the time that I really thought I would spend, when I started getting diagnosed in the end of 2020 and early 21, I went to a behavioral specialist, a therapist, and I was talking through a bunch of stuff, and it was kind of like every couple of weeks I'd meet with her again, and she was giving me trial and error type medication. And like, depending on when I'd go back, how I felt, she would suggest other things. Okay, so originally I go in and she puts me on Wellbutrin. And I'm like, cool, this helps me not feel so sad all the time. Like, I can actually get out of bed or like leave the house more. So then, but I was like, but I'm still having like that panic feeling and like the intrusive thoughts. And she's like, okay, well, why don't you try, she said Lexapro, but I ended up doing Pristiq, which is similar. So an SSRI. So I had like the Wellbutrin, which I can't tell you what the type of drug that is classified as, but it's typically anxiety depression. And then you have the SSRI, which is the serotonin reuptake inhibitor on top of it. So then I'm taking these two on top. And then she's like, and then here's some Ativan, for when it's really bad. So like, I'm taking double these, like 3 different medications on a daily basis, pretty much, supposedly to function. And then throughout the conversation, she's like, I think you also might be ADHD. Like, I could see you feeling overwhelmed by the interstate and all the different things, and there's too many options, and you just don't know where to begin, so you just kind of like freeze. I'm like, yeah, that sounds possible. I have other possible ADHD symptoms, and like throughout my life, and my family has had some, whatever. So she's like, okay, so here's some Vyvanse that you can work on taking. And I'm like, can I take it with it? And she's like, oh yeah, it's fine. You can take it all together. So I'm on a daily basis Wellbutrin, Pristiq, Vyvanse, and then Ativan as needed. Oh, by the way, I was still drinking. So that's, icing on the cake. So 2021 was a wild year on so many levels. And I can see now how much some of that stuff was affecting it. The honest truth is that it did change who I was. I was less emotional, less affectionate, colder. I definitely got the term colder a lot. It did affect my sex drive, especially the SSRI. The Vyvanse was fun in some ways, and it really helped me be productive. The Vyvanse really helped me be productive, but it also made me more aggressive, which is not necessarily a good thing. And I think it made my fuse shorter, which is interesting because the other stuff I was taking was supposed to make my fuse longer. So like, you're sedated, but then this thing pushes you, and so then you're like spiking, so then maybe you're having responses that are sharper than they need to be, and whatever, and then we'll just drink at the end of the night to wash it all away and, go to sleep. Lord. And then they're like, okay, so you might be ADHD. We're going to have you take this, we're going to have you tested, okay? So you do all this testing, and you answer these things. There was like a couple different sessions over a couple different weeks. And finally they called me and they're like, okay, well, you're not really ADHD. Like, that's not really what it's saying. It's actually saying you're bipolar 2 manic depressive. And I was like, yeah, okay. So on one hand, like, I think my mom dealt with manic depression, and I've seen how that can be. And to be honest, I don't feel like I've ever dealt with mania to the point that I was like bedridden throughout the day on a regular basis. No, not at all. I still was productive and did what I needed to do and showed up for my kids and stuff. But I would get to the point where I was doing more of the bare minimum, or like wasn't really present and involved emotionally because I was just, depression, anxiety, whatever. And then my mania, it's not like I would go days without sleeping, stay up all night. I've never been a night owl. I like my routine. I wasn't like blowing money out the wazoo and gambling, drugs and whatever, and losing my house. Like, so ultimately I'm like, I wonder if this mania has to do, especially now, with all these medications I'm taking, and then the drinking, and so it's like highs and lows and on and off. And like when you come down from medicine, especially Ativan, that's a very big like low and high. And like the withdrawals from taking Ativan, even if you just do it randomly, like once a day, once a month, it does, there is like a withdrawal period and the half-life and all that. So I'm like, okay, well, is this because of like my drinking and my medication already that you've been putting me on? I'm on 2 downers and an upper and then a sedation, but and drinking, and you're like, oh, you're manic depressive. I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't put me on all this stuff. I don't know what to tell you. So then they're like, okay, well, you really should probably be taking a mood stabilizer then instead of this other stuff. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, okay, so we'll give you these samples and you can try it out. And I'm like, well, what about these other drugs? And, oh, you can take it with them, but not the Vyvanse. You can't have the Vyvanse anymore because you're not ADHD. But you can take the mood stabilizers with the other depression, anxiety medicines, and then eventually, you can wean off the others, but like they won't interact with each other. Right. And again, didn't really say anything about you have to not drink at all, no matter what or whatever. But I will tell you, as soon as I took the mood stabilizers, I was like, this is not for me. I don't like how this makes me feel. I don't feel like myself. I feel like I'm trapped inside my head. But like I also feel like a zombie, and I don't really like have any feelings about anything. And that was only in like a day. Like I felt it immediately. And I think I tried to take it for 2 or 3 days. I was like, screw this. Like I just can't. Talk about a guinea pig. And the whole time, you're under the guise of like, this is going to help me. This is going to make it better. This is going to help me function. And So then my lovely fiance at the time, now husband, and I decided to have a baby because I was getting older. We loved each other. We knew we wanted more children. We'll wait and get married and do the baby first, okay? Stop birth control. Get pregnant like within 3-4 weeks, like super fast. And then all the pregnancy feelings and hormones show up really fast. And I knew I was pregnant because I didn't want to drink. Alcohol didn't taste good. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that this is gonna go. And then they're like, no, you can stay on all your medication for your pregnancy. Like, you can stay on the SSRI and the Wellbutrin. It won't affect the baby. You'll be fine, you know? And everyone was so worried about my emotional state that, like, oh, you know, maybe I needed this. And so I stayed on it my whole pregnancy. And then the irony is, both my pregnancies, my cravings have been bad. Like, literally, I crave stuff I never eat. Like, horrible fast food, greasy food, sour gummy candy, all these things that I never eat normally. It doesn't sound good. I don't want it. So not only was my diet utter crap, filled with horrible things I think about, the dyes and the toxins and whatever, and I'm on this other crappy medication that's totally messing with my body chemistry. And then I'm pregnant, which the hormones are real. Like, what a mess, you know? What a mess. I love you, Kevin. I'm glad we figured it out. But, like, the whole time, we don't think this is helping. It's making me better. The happy pills. So crazy. So crazy. So then I was not that happy. And had lots of negative thoughts and wasn't very healthy for my pregnancy. Gained 50 pounds. Delivered at 199 pounds. And I think this was pitocin, but had horrible high blood pressure for like the next month after I delivered. Like 168 over 120 in the middle of the night when I would wake up, like sitting in bed. Like I hadn't even stepped out of the bed. I wasn't standing or anything, and my blood pressure was insane. And so, of course, they put me on blood pressure medicine. Yay. And talk about side effects from that, too. That's a whole other thing. Anyway, I was able to physically take care of myself to the point that I was able to get off that medicine for the blood pressure within, you know, month and a half. And then, over time, found outlets and reasons and tools to target my anxiety and trauma and then my diet that have then, you know, Rainer's 2.5 years old, so here I am, 60 pounds lighter and drinking a lot less, eating better, all the things off the medications. So what a whirlwind it's been. And I don't want people to feel like I'm anti-medicine, because I really don't think I have the place to say that. But I do, more than ever, believe that you can heal your body and your mind and many ailments and diseases if you are having as close to a natural plant-based diet, grass-fed animals, all the normal, old school, classic, this is how we live our life kind of way. I think we would be astounded at how much better we would feel, how much we wouldn't need many different things. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So if anybody wants to talk about it, I'll probably have people on my podcast eventually talk about it. But I'm really happy. What a road it's been. Hopefully I haven't had any heart damage from all this. Anyway, until next time, bye.